was on Instagram. I was watching it or someplace like this.
Sure.
But you were talking about social constructions, and you said, does that mean social constructions aren't real? And he said, well, no. And then he brought up the example of money. But in fact, money is not real. Paper is real. The social construction is very much not real. It's not tangibly
I guess, like,
real
what do you mean by, like, real?
I mean, it's not up for sense data. So it's not objectively real. It's constructed. It's only constructed in our minds. So money can become valueless tomorrow or valuable tomorrow, depending on whichever way we decide to throw it. But there's
I mean, I don't know. Try going to a bank and saying that money isn't real. You know, like it's certainly real within the society we live in, and I think that's kind of what matters when particularly talking about things like gender.
No, it's particularly not what matters. In fact, because just because you say we act in a way that something is real, even if it's not real, does not make that thing real.
Well, it's certainly real in our society.
Well, no, it's not. Pieces of paper are real in our society, and the value that we give them is socially constructed.
Yes, it's socially constructed, which makes it real in our society.
Yeah, is a school a building, or is a school an actual place that you go?
I mean, it's kind of both.
No, it's just one. Because if you decide that the building's no longer a school, it no longer is. Right? But the building itself has to be constructed. It's always going to be a building regardless, because it's something that's actually real. So my position is that gender, as a social construction, gender is not real at all and has never been real. And it's a construction that's been made up by trans advocates in order to try to describe bizarre
Wait, are you saying that
phenomenon.
trans people invented gender?
No. Well, wait, back up. Gender advocates, modern gender advocacy was a lot of that came from guys like John Money.
I mean, people were talking about gender as a social phenomenon far before John Money. You have to admit that.
When were they saying the word gender and not using it interchangeably with the word sex? Because that's what people do. The reason you guys
when you start like distinguishing things in terms of like terminology, that's not when like a concept like starts to exist. I think that like you're definitely muddling the conversation by trying to say that John Money invented gender.
No, the opposite is true. You're doing that. So I'm delineating between gender and sex, which is exactly what you guys say you want.
Yeah, I do the same.
I do that. Okay, so I'm going to delineate between gender and I'm going to delineate between sex. So when I'm delineating between gender, right, the actual concept of gender was not a real concept until it started getting pushed in roughly the last 40 years.
Social roles and expectations attached to people of different types have existed long before John Money.
Yeah, but that was not called gender.
I don't really care about like what it's called. I think that what matters is if it exists. I mean, we didn't have the words for so many things that existed in nature, existed in reality, and they still existed before we had the terms for them.
Okay, so don't
just because you have before you have a term for something, it still exists.
You're doing a word concept fallacy. So back up. Okay, gender.
Explain.
The social. Yeah, I'm trying to. You have to stop talking, though. The word concept fallacy that you're using to express gender, people right now, even right this second, almost everybody on planet Earth who uses the word gender in the English sense confuses it with sex. They use it interchangeably with the word sex. You would agree that that's true, right?
In certain contexts, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that precisely what people mean by gender is contextual, just like all words.
Yeah, but they're using it the laymen, who is somebody who's not a gender studies professor or has gone to college to learn about gender studies, when they hear gender, like if they're in a video game and it says select your gender, they're thinking male, female. They're not thinking about your 10 million genders that you could possibly come up with. They're thinking male, female. They use it interchangeably with the word sex. So we untangle those two things, and I'm willing to grant you that gender is the conceptualization of what you would consider male or female behavior.
I would go more so with social roles and expectations which society assigns to people rather than like behavior. I don't think that like performing certain behaviors makes someone a certain gender. I think it has to do more so with like your lived social experience.
Right. But there's no way to make a determination on what that is. So we don't know what...
you can certainly observe someone's lived social experience and see how they're perceived and treated by others. It's culturally relative, but it's certainly observable.
It's not only relative, but there's no way that it could be assigned. It's all self-assignment for a reason.
No, it's literally assigned by others. When you go out to a store and somebody calls you sir, they're assigning the gender of man to you, aren't they?
Well, if that was the case, then how come when somebody assigns to you sir, you say no, it's not sir, it's this? Because you're self-assigning, right?
Because I'm asserting that their assertion was incorrect, or their assignment was incorrect.
So it is based around self-assignment when it comes to gender. Thank you.
At least gender identity is based in self-assignment, and I think that we should treat people socially based off of their gender identity.
Right. Well, so let's dive into this a little bit. So what you did with that poor kid who talked to you was you played the vegan name the trait game, which I've seen done 100 times before. And if you can't name the exact delineating trait, that means there's no difference between eating a cow or a person or blah, blah, blah.
My point is not that there's no differences. My point is that there's no such thing as a clean line. These things are more complex and mutable than people like to think.
Yeah, but there is. And
what's the clean line which separates males and females then?
Well, so I'm going to tell you, it's gamete. The gametes are a binary. There can only be large gamete production or small gamete production. Period.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Hold up.
Hang on, stop.
Wait. Wait. No, there's a bit of a problem here.
You can't wait until I'm done.
You made a bit of a problem here. I know how gametes work. You made a bit of a problem here though. You're trying to refer to biological sex as kind of just like people's general notion, like what is generally perceived by people.
Nope,
people don't generally think about gametes when they think about biological sex. They generally think about how people look and like their body parts. But also, if you're talking about gamete production as the defining characteristic of biological sex, people who don't produce gametes would not have a biological sex. Do you believe that's true?
Okay, so no, and I can demonstrate this, but you have to not cut me off midpoint, and I won't do the same to you. Does that sound fair?
Well, I think that if you say something that is wrong or mischaracterize me, it's important to interrupt so we can have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, that interrupting is not a conversation. It's you stopping the conversation so that you can strawman my position.
I'm not trying to strawman your position at all.
Well, then don't interrupt.
How have I strawmanned your position?
So let me just start with a simple question. Is there any human being on planet Earth who's ever been documented to have impregnated themselves?
Self-impregnation? We don't have documented cases, although the medical literature believes that it is possible.
But it's never happened even once, has it?
Well, we don't know if it's happened like before we started documenting medical cases in the way we do now.
Not even in chimeras. Well, you would still have anecdotal historical evidence somewhere.
Well, what do we do? We actually do have historical anecdotal evidence. Things like Mary the Virgin. No. Things like there have been cultural tales, anecdotes throughout tons of human cultures of people talking about self-fertilization. They have existed in lots of like folk tales and other like other documented histories and stuff. Just nothing in like kind of like the medical literature.
The story of the Virgin Mary was not a story of self-impregnation, was it? You just lied, didn't you?
There are people that believe it is a story of self-impregnation.
No, there's no person who believes in the story who believes it's a story about self-impregnation. You know what I mean?
Not true. I don't think you can claim that no person believes that.
Just saying there's somebody somewhere who probably does is ridiculous. Now, that is not a story about self-impregnation. That is ridiculous.
Do you just want me to find a story about self-impregnation in historical literature? Because I can find those. They exist.
Stop. There have been tons and tons of historical medical doctors going back thousands of years, before even modern medicine was there, who documented all types of ailments from all over the world. There's never been a single case documented of human beings being able to self-impregnate, even amongst chimeras, who would be the only ones who would even be capable of such a thing, and they're not, because gametes are 100% binary.
But there are people who have produced both gametes, and the medical literature asserts that it is possible for somebody to self-impregnate. That's what the medical literature asserts.
But, so what, you could say almost anything is possible, but that doesn't mean it's true.
Well, essentially what they do is they analyze the capacity of chimeras and find that it is certainly possible that they could have all of the capacities needed to self-impregnate. And we even have case studies of people that have produced both gametes.
But they
How
have
can
not
wait?
ever been able
How can
to
you claim that gametes are
self-impregnate.
binary when there are people that have produced both gametes? There are people that produce no gametes.
Okay.
There are people that produce one or the other. That's four options, not two.
There are like 6 or 7 global cases of chimeras that have been, I think in the case of chimeras that could produce both due to a rapid genetic defect, there's only been like 2 or 3 in all of human history that we found.
Binaries don't have exceptions, my dude.
Both.
Wait.
Okay, so and there's no exception there either, because they're not actually producing reproductive gametes. They cannot impregnate themselves. So that it's not.
So if you're going to refer solely to reproductive gametes, then people that don't produce gametes don't have a biological sex.
No, that's incorrect. First and foremost, though, we need to get a concession on what the modern medical literature says on gametes. Modern medical literature on gametes say that they're 100% binary, true or false.
Human gametes? What do you,
Yes.
I guess, like, what do you mean by binary?
The one sex produces the big ones and one produces the small ones. What do you mean?
Well,
Don't
if you're
play word
talking
games.
about gamete size, it's not like they come in exactly 2 sizes. There is variation in size. However, we can extract it into 2 categories, but there is variation in gamete size more than just like exactly 2 sizes.
Okay, but ova are large gametes.
Correct.
Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with that.
This is ridiculous. Okay, so does the modern literature not say that gametes are 100% binary?
Like, I don't think that the medical literature states that gamete size is 100% binary.
Now, if I sent you a link right now to the most modern medical literature that claims that gametes are 100% binary, would you believe it, or would you?
I mean, I have peer-reviewed scientific articles in my research doc which show that there is variation in gamete size, which in ways that affect fertility.
No, not gamete size. There's only 2 types. There's only 2 types.
Well, size is what delineates the types.
Okay, there's only sperm and ova. That's it. 2.
Size is what delineates those types, right?
And males, who cares? It doesn't matter. There's only 2 types.
Well, if size is the underlying characteristic, the size is not like this kind of like perfectly consistent binary.
Okay.
There's variation within those size ranges.
No, they also behave differently. What are you talking about? Okay, sperm for males and ova for females. Yes or no?
Typically, yeah.
No, there's no typically. There can only be those.
I mean, if you want to like do a binary abstraction, like we can go with that, sure.
Just say yes. Just say yeah. I mean, don't. That's the problem. Is like when it's easy for you to be bad faith with someone who's an idiot, but if you talk to someone who knows what they're talking about, you have to.
I literally just told you that we can go with a binary abstraction of gamete size if you want.
Great. Yeah, but do you believe that they're binary?
I don't think that binary. I don't think that gamete size is binary, but I do think that we can come up with a binary abstraction of types.
Gamete type. Yeah. So males produce sperm, females produce ova 100% of the time. There is no.
What about people that don't produce gametes? Wait. People don't produce. There are people that don't produce gametes.
We'll get to them, and we're going to get to those people. But first, we need to establish who produces which type. Males produce sperm, females produce ova. Correct?
Yeah, generally.
No, not. See, this is a problem. We can't move anywhere if you just say yeah generally, because it's not a yeah generally. It's yes 100% of the time. Only females can produce ova.
Well, here's the problem. I would disagree with that concept because I believe that a trans male can produce ova and is male. That's why I have to disagree there.
Wait, no. Well, so what you're doing now you really are doing a word concept fallacy because you're conflating gender and sex.
No, I'm talking about a trans male as in someone who medically transitions to male.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if they medically transition, they're still male.
Well, yeah, they medically transition to male, therefore they're a trans male.
Okay, but they're still not a biological male.
Well, biologically, they changed so many aspects of their biological sex. I mean, many of their biological sex markers that matter, for their medicine, that matter for how they're treated by doctors, are in line with males, not females. Like hormones literally change many aspects of your biological sex.
Yeah, but so this is where you tried to trip this last guy up, and it's humorous to me. So let me ask you a question. Let's say you have a trans male, meaning they started as a biological female and they transitioned to being male.
Yes.
Can that trans male ever produce ova, ever?
That trans male produce ova? Yeah. typically.
So what about the other way around? Can they ever produce sperm?
We do not have the technology for that as of yet.
So no.
At least not as of yet.
So no.
As of yet.
Right.
Well, no, I just don't think you can say, like, absolutely no, because, like, science and technology advance over time, you know?
Human beings can't fly unassisted as of yet.
True.
So that would make the assumption that one day they might be able to fly completely unassisted, right?
Well, I think that we're talking about with assistance here. That's the difference. Because medical transition is assisted. Okay, therefore, assisted, yeah, humans can fly.
Okay, but can they fly unassisted? Meaning, if they don't have, like, something attached.
But we're not talking about people who are unassisted right now. We're talking about people who have medically transitioned.
That's the thing.
That's the difference.
I'm still going to grant this and say that these people are completely assisted, and they still will never be able to produce the opposite gamete, ever.
Correct.
Because
well, at least as of now.
No, ever. I said ever. They can't do it.
What if we develop, like, testicle transplants?
You could, even if you were to do that, you would still have to create birth canals, uteruses. You would have to create all sorts of.
We're talking about a trans male.
We're talking about things that are beyond the beyond here. This is not technology. Even if you were to envision technology like this, it's not right around the corner or right around the corner of the corner of the corner of the corner. This is like
it doesn't matter. That's why I'm being clear about using things like as of yet.
But it's okay. Well, unicorns could exist if I could create a portal gun that led to unicorn land, right? That's possible.
Those are very different levels of hypothetical.
But it is possible, right?
I mean, womb transplants and trans women are actively being researched right now. I don't think it's that far off before we might be able to do like things like producing opposite gametes through surgical intervention.
But knowing that gametes are binary, knowing that the sexes are binary, they have to be binary because only one sex can produce one type of gamete. And no matter how many different hormones they put you on right this second, you could never produce the opposite gamete. That's the clear delineation.
Right, but I don't believe that producing a certain gamete is required to be a member of that sex. What is the biological sex of somebody that doesn't produce gametes? Right,
so let's get into that. So you still have the capacity. You still would end up going with the capacity for being able to produce such a gamete. Now, that is within the scientific purview of assistance. With people who are unable to produce gametes in their own biological sex body, they are able to often, with assistance, produce those gametes because their body's actually engineered to do so.
But they don't always have the capacity. You have to admit that.
Not always, but even if they don't always have the capacity.
So wait, if they never have the capacity, what biological sex are they?
They're still going to be the sex that would ordinarily have the capacity.
How do you determine that?
Well, the markers are always there to determine that. So if you were born with a penis but no testicles, you have no gametes, but you're still a male.
So this system, this system would misclassify people with complete androgen sensitivity syndrome. Are you aware of that intersex condition?
No. Okay, well we can go over each and every intersex condition, but even if we did, it would have no bearing on transgender. Because almost no intersex
trans people essentially are medically inducing an intersex condition. That's essentially what they're doing by medically transitioning.
No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not intersex. That's bullshit and a lie. They are not intersex, and they are not ever going to be intersex. You can't induce an intersex condition that way. That's ridiculous on its face.
But they literally develop mixed sex characteristics. That's what they're literally inducing mixed sex characteristics.
No, they're not. They're not intersex.
Wait, you don't think that like hormones is sex characteristics?
I don't think that it makes you intersex. Intersex has specific criteria for genetic deficiencies. Not you get on hormones and then you become intersex.
What do you mean genetic deficiencies?
Something that's abnormal, genetic abnormality. Let's put it that way.
Genetic abnormalities happen in all all the time.
So what? That's why we're talking about. I
don't think that you can necessarily call it a deficiency. It's just an abnormality.
Oh, okay. Just because I used the word deficiency, but I clarified it, right? So we can move on from that. So back to this. If we're looking at intersex, you still are only going to have, even in intersex people, one type of gamete production. or one type of possibility for gamete production.
Or none.
Because human beings are...
There are intersex people who will never produce either gamete and will never have the capacity to produce either gamete.
That's true. But
so what biological sex are they?
I'm trying to explain it to you.
Go for it.
You would then default to what their body could have been able to process for gametes. And that's why we usually use XX or XY. Even in XXY, we can make that determination. Even in XXY.
But wait. There are people such that have ovotesticular syndrome that we can literally choose which capacity they will develop. They will have the capacity to potentially do either, and through birth surgery and or hormone interventions, we can actually literally choose what gametes they're going to produce later in life. So wouldn't that be both?
Because thus far, what you've done is you have tried to find nuance where there is no nuance. So let's pull this up and actually find out if you're telling the truth. What's the condition called?
So that would be in the case of ovotesticular syndrome.
Let's find out. Most affected okay, they have XX chromosome makeup karyotypes.
Not always.
Patients. No. Okay, so once again, you're the most disingenuous person on planet Earth. So no, you can't just pick and choose.
There are certain cases where doctors actually can pick and choose.
No, that's literally
the
biggest load of shit on planet Earth. What this says here is that they're basically born females for the most part. There's some rare cases where they have intersex markers, but no, they're not being able to choose. They go by what they think is going to be an active gamete that can work.
Right, but in some cases, it could be either, and depending on what the doctor chooses, they can either do testosterone treatment and surgery or estrogen treatment and surgery and make them produce one gamete or the other later in life. No, literally, there are cases where they could do either. That's all I'm trying to say. There are some cases where they could do either.
Well, fine, let's grant it. Let's just grant it and say that in this one particular genetic abnormality, that they're able to go in and with a simple clipper tuck change the gamete production. That's still binary for life, isn't it?
But doesn't that mean that they changed their biological sex?
Well, no, they didn't change their biological sex. There was
but they literally surgically intervened to make them produce one gamete or the other.
Because otherwise they would produce neither. That's what the medical literature here says. Is that they would produce neither, so they allow for one to be produced, and it's going to be the one that's actually viable, because the other one doesn't even seem viable.
There are cases where either could be viable, and they can essentially, make one happen or the other.
But the thing that they do know.
So what is their biological sex?
But neither one of them is going to be viable if they don't medically intervene.
Okay, so what's their biological sex?
Hang on. So let me clarify first. So what they're doing is they're going in and saying, okay, this is the one that's going to be the most viable because this is the actual sexual characteristics that this person has. So we're not going to obviously try to make this person produce ova if they have a penis, because that wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it?
So what's their biological sex?
Male. In that case, it would be male. In the other case, it would be female.
What determines that? Wait, what determines that?
Here, because you still have the internal characteristics for which type of gamete you can carry successfully.
But we've already established these are people that have the internal characteristics such that they could produce either gamete.
No, well, actually they can't. If there's no interjection done, neither gamete will be viable. So that's just untrue. You just fabricated it. In order to create,
you talked about potential capacity, even including medical intervention, such as in the case of an infertile cis woman that through you said you said that an infertile cis woman is still female because through medical intervention they can make her fertile. You literally said that.
No. What I said is that she has the only biological characteristics that are capable of carrying ova successfully.
Right. So you're basing it off of potential capacity. This intersex person has the potential capacity for either.
Uh-huh.
So how can biological sex be binary?
Well, no, that's not true. They don't actually have the capacity for
So
either. They only have
you
the
were talking about
capacity
potential
for
capacity.
one.
You believe that it's the
Yeah,
potential
they don't even have
capacity.
the, but they don't even have the potential capacity for both. They only have the
No, they
potential
have the potential capacity for
one.
both because
No, they
you
don't.
asserted that potential capacity includes medical intervention. You did assert that.
Even with medical intervention, they only have the capacity for one.
But here's the problem. They have the potential capacity for either with medical intervention.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't. Because if they guess wrong, that person will just never successfully produce gametes.
No. What I'm saying is that ovotestes contain both contain both ovarian and testicular tissue, and depending on the hormones and surgical procedures you do to this body, you can make it produce sperm or ova. You can make it produce either.
So depending on if the characteristics are male, meaning that they can carry male sperm, they will go for the male option. And if they're female, meaning that they're capable of carrying ova, they'll go for the female option.
But there are cases where they could choose. Stop. There are cases where they can choose either. That's been my point this entire time.
No. Wait. No, because you're lying. There are
not at all.
If they choose wrong, if they choose the wrong one and the body can't carry it, it never produces it ever. So you're not understanding. You're not even listening to me. What I'm saying is that there are people who, depending on what surgical and medical intervention you do, they will produce either or. It all depends on the surgical intervention. They literally exist. We have this document in the medical literature. No, I'm looking at it right now, and they literally don't exist. If that body is incapable of carrying the opposite gamete, even if you select for that gamete, it won't produce it.
Then why do we have people that have produced both gametes?
We don't.
We literally have people who have produced both gametes.
Okay, but they can't successfully impregnate themselves because one gamete is not viable.
Why do you keep on wait. You keep on switching between stop. You keep on switching between what is required of being a sex. First you're going with the gametes they produce, then you're going with the potential to produce certain gametes, then you're going for the potential to have the capacity to produce certain gametes, and now you're going for being able to successfully reproduce. You keep on changing the story whenever it's convenient for you.
Oh, I see. So, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Do birds have feathers?
Typically.
Does this mean that everything that has feathers is a bird?
No.
No. Do animals have fur?
Some.
Some, yeah. So I guess every animal that has fur, though, right? You wouldn't necessarily have to say it's a mammal. It could be something else. When you talk about biological categorizations, you use a step-by-step program in order to make a determination.
Biological sex is a composite of many characteristics, and many of them you can change, such as a trans female who takes hormones. You can change many of those characteristics.
But you can't change gamete production or the
so what?
Of a body.
I don't care. I literally don't care what gametes I produce. What I care about,
you care about, it matters what's biologically sound.
Right, and what's biologically sound is that I am biologically female in many ways.
No, not in any ways.
Hormonally, I'm female. Anatomically, most of my body is female. In terms of brain sex, my body is more female.
Hang on. Can you produce ova?
No, and I don't care. I don't think it's required of being a female.
But is your body capable of ever producing ova?
Not with current technology, but I don't think that's required to be female.
No, so let me tell you something. The most common definition worldwide of female is one typically associated with reproduction.
That's not what biologists refer to biological sex as. They don't refer to it solely as gametes, though.
Well, biologists 100% say that sex is the binary.
That is not true. No, but
yes.
Really, that's what biologists say. Why was this peer-reviewed article from Nature in 2015? Wait, why does this peer-reviewed scientific article say the idea of two sexes is simplistic? Biologists now think that there is a wider spectrum than that. This is literally from Nature, one of the most respected.
What's the meta-analysis on it?
What do you mean?
Was there a meta-analysis that this was included in so that we have a source body of material of a large sample sizing of biologists who agree with this?
This is from Nature.
It's meaningless. So what? What's the meta-analysis?
Do you want me to send you the article?
I want to know if there's a meta-analysis. Can you answer the question or not?
This isn't like a population study.
So what? You don't need to have a population study necessarily for meta-analysis. It depends on what the goal is.
What would you do meta-analysis on if you don't have a population?
You could do a meta-analysis on abstractions even if you wanted to. Just depends on what the scientific goal is.
That would be a population of abstractions. This isn't a population study.
Okay, well, when you're talking about population, I'm thinking that you're talking about, you know, human population, because that's the subject of this. Are you not doing that, or?
This is a summary of biological knowledge.
A summary of biological knowledge, which would have to go over an entire population, right? Otherwise, how would they have a summarization of what's biologically feasible?
Because they're citing other studies.
Okay, so then that would be a meta-analysis. So what is the meta-analysis? Just send me the study and I'll look myself.
You want to see the Nature article? Sure.
Yeah.
Here is the Nature article. I have other peer-reviewed scientific articles that discuss how it is not the case that, you know, biologists view biological sex as a binary. That's simply not true.
Okay. So
I have another peer-reviewed study from the American Journal of Human Biology, which states developmental biology suggests that a belief in absolute sexual dimorphism is wrong. Instead, two overlapping bell-shaped curves can be used to conceptualize sexual variation across the population. Within each major bell, genital morphology varies quantitatively. In the region of overlap, qualitative variation in chromosomal and genital morphology and in hormonal activity exists. It's not a binary. That's what biologists think.
So if we're going to go with studies, if we're just going to do sauce now that you've been exhausted on logic, send me your best sauce and I'll send you my best sauce for what biologists currently believe globally about sex. And it's that they believe that there's males and females and that there is no third sex. Isn't that correct? What's the third sex?
What's your study?
One more time, before I send you anything, tell me what the third sex is.
I don't think that biological sex is a binary. Rather, it exists along a spectrum.
Then
you don't have to have three cleanly delineated categories to point out that something exists along a spectrum. You can have a spectrum between two extremes.
Yeah, that's true. But if there's a spectrum, there's a delineation point. Otherwise, it can't exist on a spectrum.
You can have a spectrum between two extremes. That's a spectrum, my dude.
Well, even if you have a spectrum between two extremes, then whatever the delineation point is between the two extremes delineates between the two extremes. Yes?
Say that again?
Okay. Are you aware of the number 100?
Yes.
Okay. 99.99 is extreme when it comes to closeness of the number 100. But what's the delineation point?
Well, it would depend what we're ranging between.
Well, we're just 0.1. We're ranging between a decimal of 1.
So we're going from 1 to 100? Well, then you could certainly say that 99.999 is closer to the 100 category, but it's not exactly the same as the extreme.
If you're going by decimals of 0.1, that would be an extreme. The delineation point would be the decimal 0.1. So if you add that decimal 0.1, now you're at 100. You've delineated between 99 and 100 with the decimal 0.1. So what's the delineation point between the sexes? It's gametes.
I don't think that there exists any kind of clean delineation point between male and female. There does not exist any kind of clean line which you can use to cleanly separate male and female, but we can certainly lay out sex characteristics along a spectrum.
No, I've already given you one.
But you act like it's some kind of clean separator when it's not. There are people that don't produce gametes. There are people that have produced both gametes. It simply is not a clean separator.
No, it is a clean separator. It's true. So there is no such thing as a 100% biological truth, but there doesn't need to be. Because even nuance within definite
So then it's not a binary, because binaries don't have exceptions.
Stop. Even within definiendums, there's no way to express definitionally something perfectly. It can't be done. You can always find some type of nuance to attack a definition. That's why debaters attack each other's definitions all the time, because you can never capture the essence of something entirely through a definiendum.
So therefore you can't say it's a binary.
No. Biologically, though, this works differently. There's almost always a delineation between thing X and thing Y, which makes thing Y and thing X. In this case, it's gametes, which are binary. They've always been binary, and the bodies in which are...
But the problem is gamete production cannot be binary.
No,
as in the gametes which you produce and or the gametes you have the potential to produce, neither of those are binary. There are more than two options.
Well, wait. There aren't. There's only ever one option.
Let me.
For a body that can produce gametes, there's only one option ever.
No, we literally talked about the cases of ovotesticular syndrome where they have the potential to produce either, and there are people that have produced both. We have this in the medical literature.
No, you're doing you're making a logical fallacy, and it's a conceptualization issue that you're having here. Let me ask you this. I'll try to add.
You're just stating that it's a fallacy because it disproves you.
Well, no, it doesn't disprove anything. Let's assume.
What's the logical fallacy?
I'm going to tell you. Well, it's a word concept again. It's a word concept fallacy. So one more time, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make it this conflation where you say, because at this delineation point, even though this body would not be able to accept this gamete production, because it was capable at this one point of producing it, even though it would not have been viable, then that means there's two sexes in it, and it's not true. Because that gamete still would not be viable even if they selected for it surgically. That's what I keep trying to tell you. And you know that that's true.
But they can produce viable gametes depending on what they select for surgically. They can produce, they can potentially produce viable gametes of either. You're just not understanding this.
No. They could, no.
There is overlap. There is overlap in the gametes which they could produce that are viable, depending on what they choose. There is overlap there in some cases. You're just wrong about this.
If they select for the wrong one, right, the body can't produce it. It's that simple. The body will not be able to successfully carry that gamete.
In some cases, they could select wrong and they won't be able to produce. However, there are cases where they could select either and they would be capable of producing whichever one they select. There are cases like that that exist.
No, there's not. Because what they do is they select for the correct gamete. That's it.
How do you know what's the correct gamete? Wait, how do you know what's correct?
Because you can tell by the physical characteristics of the body carrying it.
So it seems like biological sex is more than just gametes, and it has to do with these physical characteristics as well.
No, it has to do with the physical characteristics capable of carrying successfully a binary gamete. That's it. Simple.
But there's so much more to biological sex than just gametes.
Okay, I just got done saying to you 100 times, like if you have a woman who has a hysterectomy, right? She's still a woman.
I agree.
She's still a female. She's 100% a female. But the reason is because that body is capable of carrying a uterus, and that body is capable of carrying the gametes.
So wait.
That's how we know.
Can you explain to me what is the word concept fallacy you keep on bringing up?
Well, it depends on which context that we're talking about that you used it in. The original.
What is a word concept fallacy? Because like when I Google it, I'm not finding it. Like this doesn't seem to be any kind of like commonly accepted thing.
Well, it is in an informal sense. It's not a formal fallacy, but there's informal fallacies as well, like the slippery slope, for instance.
So can you explain what is the word concept fallacy to me?
Yeah. Word concept fallacy would be somebody conflating sex and gender, for instance. They're taking the word and they're taking the concept, but they're making it fallacious by conflating it with something that is not.
How am I fallaciously conflating things?
Well, you were originally erroneously conflating sex and gender. And the way that you were doing that is... Yeah, you were, because you were saying...
How do I conflate sex and gender?
Because you say that you consider a female who's had bottom surgery, now somehow they're actually a biological male, and that's absurd.
So what I'm saying is that...
concept fallacy.
No, that's not... Wait, that's not conflating gender and sex at all. I'm referring to sex as physical biological characteristics, which are sexually dimorphic in humans, which would include things like chromosomes, hormones, reproduction, anatomy, brain matter distributions to an extent, and so essentially those are
part.
You just want to focus on the reproduction because that's the one I can't change. But it's important to recognize. It's important to recognize that biological sex accompanies all those other characteristics as well, and it's important for us to recognize that for medical reasons, for biological reasons, for physical difference reasons. For example, we separate sports along the lines. We separate sports along the lines of sex, but that has nothing to do with gamete production.
We don't do that anymore.
No, we literally do. They're separated along the lines of hormonal sex. No, they are literally separated along the lines of hormonal sex.
No, they're not. But they're not literally separated along the lines of reproductive sex.
They're separated along the lines of hormonal sex, which shows you that sex is more than just reproduction.
All of these things that you're talking about, when it comes to hormones and when it comes to estrogen levels, and when it comes to
it is completely silly to suggest that.
You got to let me get a word in. Okay, so listen, all of these second characteristics when it comes to non-reproductive biology are all there to assist in reproduction.
Why are these characteristics secondary?
That's like the primary edict.
Wait, why are those characteristics secondary? Why do you decide that those are the secondary ones?
Because all of the characteristics and hormones in a male or a female are designed based around reproduction. All of them.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, you can have certain hormones without having certain reproductive capacities. I think that you are subjectively selecting reproduction to be primary because that's what you want.
Would you say then that testosterone in a male is one of the single most important chemicals they can have in their body?
I'd say it's pretty important, yeah.
And isn't it tied 100% into the reproduction of a male?
Not 100%. It does other things too.
Yeah, but low testosterone affects reproduction.
Right. It's one thing it affects, but it affects a lot of other things as well. It's not solely for the purpose of solely for the purpose of reproduction. Just like biological sex is not solely for the purpose of reproduction.
Yes, it is. So biological sex is solely for the purposes of reproduction. That's what a male and a female are there for, is to reproduce.
But we recognize sex in other contexts, so it can't solely be about reproduction.
You recognize sex in other concepts, but biologically, you have a male and a female.
No, biologically, we recognize sex in other concepts. For example, breast cancer screening. People with breasts, people who are biologically female and develop female breasts, have to get breast cancer screenings after a certain age. Trans females are included in that because we develop the biological breasts.
Males have to have breast surgery screening as well. What are you talking about? Breast cancer.
But trans females' breast cancer risk is much more in line with females than males.
Well, yeah, they stuff
because they are biologically female in that way.
No, because they stuff shit in their chest that doesn't belong there. That's why.
What are you talking about?
Silicone and plastic in their chest to create artificial breasts.
I'm talking about people that just take HRT are at a higher risk of breast cancer because they develop female breast structure.
Oh, yeah, because at that point, you're infusing them with a hormone that increases artificially the breast size when it ordinarily would not.
Hormones literally affect your biological sex. That's why.
I'm not saying that hormones don't have other things besides just reproduction. I'm saying that reproduction is the primary.
Therefore, biological sex is more than just reproduction.
No, because we have a primary edict, and the primary edict is reproduction.
Why is that the primary edict? Why is that the primary edict?
Because you'll go extinct without it, and so evolution literally selects for it. Literally, that's the evolutionary primary edict, is reproduction. That's what it selects for.
You don't have to reproduce to have lived a successful life.
Wait a second. You won't have anybody living any life if you don't have reproduction. That's why evolution selects for it.
But here's the problem. You can't act like that is the only purpose of biological sex.
It is the only purpose. It is the primary edict. The overarching purpose for being in a male body and a female body is for the purpose of reproduction, viable gametes. Without those, you have nothing. There is no successful reproduction. That's why evolution has selected this way. It did it on purpose to make sure that we had a maximum amount of human beings on planet Earth. We were selected for it. Reproduction is 100%.
Are you just going to reduce people down to like baby machines?
People are baby machines.
I think we're so much more than that. And biologists agree. Biologists agree that it's important to recognize the difference between reproductive sex and hormonal sex and anatomical sex because it matters in medical and biological contexts. Wait, you're saying that hormonal sex doesn't matter in medical contexts? Different from reproductive sex?
I'm saying that the primary.
You said that I was spitting bullshit, and that's what I said. How is that bullshit?
Yeah, and you are spitting bullshit, but I wasn't saying it about that. I was saying about the thing you said before that, which is no, it's not all about reproduction. Yes, it's all about reproduction. That's what's been selected for.
I think that life is about more than reproduction. I'm going to be honest with you.
That's because you're not going to be able to reproduce. So of course you're going to think that. So why wouldn't you?
I mean, if you just want to treat women as baby machines, I doubt you're going to be able to reproduce.
Well, I've successfully reproduced 5 times, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow! Congrats on busting a nut.
Yeah, well, you mean congrats on having a viable family with a viable wife inside of a nice home with a nice living on acreage. I know it's tough. It's terrifically bad. But it's not my fault. I did not choose for you to not be able to reproduce. I'm telling you that the primary edict of human beings is to reproduce. It's our primary drive. Men, in fact, will choose sex before food, even if they're half starved to death.
What about
They'll
asexual
choose sex
people?
over shelter. Again, these are outliers.
Are asexual people just failures in your view?
No, they have issues that need to be treated.
What the? Asexual people don't have issues that need to be treated. They're perfectly fine existing as they are.
No, a lot of them aren't.
There's nothing wrong with being asexual.
And a lot of them.
Wait, you think there's something wrong with being asexual?
I think that there's a lot of people who are asexual due to trauma, and that's what the literature shows as well. That it's not the standard; it's a deviation from the norm when it comes to reproduction. Which are you
kidding? Wait. Just because something deviates from the norm doesn't mean that it's bad. That's literally like the ad populum fallacy.
That's you. You said it's bad. I didn't say it was bad.
You were saying that like asexual people are wrong or that like they're deformed.
I'm saying that it's often trauma that leads to the asexuality because that's what the literature says.
So do you think there's something wrong with people being asexual?
If they have experienced trauma that led to it, yeah, there's something probably wrong with them.
But just like in general, say like non-traumagenic, is there anything wrong with being asexual?
No, you have monks.
Then how can Then how can reproduction be the primary edict? Because there's nothing wrong with being asexual.
Because it's not a social norm; it's an outlier, and it's an outlier usually either based on trauma or, in some rare cases, people who give their entire life to God. They still have those reproductive urges.
You know,
they just choose
there are people that just don't experience sexual attraction. Like that's just happens.
Yeah, that's true. Very, very, very rare. Very rare. And the ones who do often are a product of trauma. And the medical literature shows that this is true. There's no denying that.
You think that most asexual people are asexual because of trauma?
Yes. Oh yeah. At least in males. I haven't read the female literature on asexuality. There might be some delineation there.
What's your source on that?
I'd have to pull it up. That was the last cluster of site papers I read on asexuality. Actually, interestingly enough, it was Zonia who brought that to my attention. But yeah, within that cluster, that most of the time it's trauma based. I mean, which makes sense.
I know. Wait, when was this
hypersexual?
Not absolutely.
Well, again,
I think that there are a lot of people out here, unlike you, who simply don't treat sex as everything that matters. There are other things that matter to them, and that they live fulfilling lives that don't need sex. I don't think that you can act like sex is all that there is to like being alive. Like that's pretty silly.
I'm gonna say that the act of having sex is the only thing to being alive. That's ridiculous. But reproduction is definitely a primary edict for happiness, and we know this based on cluster studies that people who have children are happier than people who don't have children. This is a large average. The delineation is massive. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
I think that people should chase what makes them happy. And if that's kids, then power to them. And if it's not kids, then power to them.
Yeah, of course they do. But of course you believe that. But whether you believe it or not, the literature says that what's going to make you the happiest is having children. So, there's that.
Absolutely. Like everybody who has children is happier than people that don't have children? Or is that just on average?
This is a large average, but it's a large average. This is, the deviation is big. It's not small. People who have children, on average, are much happier than people who don't have children.
Why is that?
Now, why wouldn't this?
Wait, why is that?
Be the case? That because it's your primary drive.
Is it simply having children makes people happy, or is it being in a family that is cohesive that makes people happy?
Well, it's both. It's both and not either.
I don't think you can attribute causation to that.
Well, you don't have to. We have studies on how women feel post childbirth, and you do see an upward tick in postpartum depression, but you also see a huge upward tick in happiness just from the act of having a baby. It releases all kinds of pheromones into a woman's body that makes her happier. You know what I mean?
We're talking about long-term happiness, not just temporary.
Yeah, I said both and, but I'm correcting for both. And what I'm telling
it just seems really gross that the core of your philosophy is just reducing people down to baby machines. That's just not what humans just are.
No,
we're so much more than that.
Back up. That's just absurd. Okay, I'm using logic to reduce down to evolutionary imperatives. which is exactly what you should be doing because you're a fucking scientist.
We have more like we have a greater cognition than just evolutionary imperatives.
Wait, aren't you a scientist?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do need to reduce biological concepts down to their evolutionary imperatives. You realize that, right?
We are more than just evolutionary imperatives. We have metacognition. I
didn't say that. You keep moving the goalpost. I didn't say we're not more than X. I'm saying that we should always reduce to X. So
I don't think we should always reduce to X.
Roots. Well, yes, you have to. You have to always reduce to X if you're going to make a foundational argument.
No, you don't.
Well, how do you make a foundational argument without a foundation? You want to explain that one to me?
I don't think you necessarily need to have a foundation of all these things.
Which thing do you think we don't need to have a foundation for?
I mean, if we're talking about, like, you know, what is our primary imperative?
Yeah,
I don't think you need to have like a single foundation. Or like what defines biological sex. I don't think you need to have like a single foundation for that. All of these things are multifaceted, and you are arbitrarily selecting what is primary simply because it suits your needs.
Arbitrary.
You are arbitrarily selecting it.
What you're doing is you're bringing in arbitrary qualifiers to say that the primary need is what's arbitrary, and that's ridiculous. That is not evolutionary biology at all. I don't know where in the world you came up with these bizarre concepts. I can understand how you could trick a guy like the former caller where he would be confused because you throw out word salads, but what you're saying is absurd. Their sex is binary. It is.
That's just not true. That's not what biologists think. Biologists don't think that sex is binary.
They do think that sex is binary. They do.
What's your source?
There's a delineation
What's your source?
Okay. Gametes are binary.
What's your source? Wait. What's your source that biologists believe that sex is binary? Wait, can you like point to like peer-reviewed literature from recent years which suggests that biological sex is strictly binary?
Well, what do you mean by strictly?
Like exactly only ever two outcomes.
Okay, that's ridiculous.
Because sex is not binary. The idea that sex is strictly binary is ridiculous.
No. You can't take abnormalities, genetic abnormalities, and then compare it to the general population and use the word strictly, and therefore within that nuance, this means a new sex is formed. That's not how biology works.
Oh my gosh, I'm not talking about discrete categories. I'm talking about biological sex existing along a spectrum.
Yes, biological sex exists along a spectrum of male and female. That's it.
Coolio. And you can move along the spectrum through medical transition.
Well, no, you can't, but you can't do reproduction through transition.
I agree that presently you can't change a reproductive sex, but your biological sex is so much more than just your reproductive sex.
No, it's... Well, wait, no. Again, the definition of a woman most commonly used worldwide is the sex typically associated with reproduction.
That is not what people typically think of as a woman. People typically think of a woman as a set of external physical characteristics. That is what people typically perceive women.
No, they don't. No, they don't. And they don't even typically perceive them based on the secondary sex characteristics, not anymore, because you have enough people who have transitioned who pretend that they're male that sometimes it's impossible for a male to tell. So now, more than ever, they associate.
How do people determine whether or not they're going to call someone ma'am or sir? Like how do you determine that?
Well, generally speaking, that would be based on secondary sex characteristics that you perceive. That's true. But you're perceiving those secondary sex characteristics because you believe that sex is associated with reproduction or with the male form of reproduction. That's literally how we think about things. We have to think about things. I'm pretty sure that
when you just like perceive someone as a woman and you call her ma'am, you're not thinking about her reproducing. You're thinking of her as a social category, or perhaps as certain biological external characteristics.
Well, then you're really not thinking about it very hard, because why is it
every time you see a woman you just think baby factory? Is that really it?
Well, yeah. Anytime a young man talks to a young woman, hang on, stop. Anytime a young man talks to a young woman who he thinks is attractive, what is his purpose in doing this from a biological standpoint?
I think that he could have lots of purposes. Maybe he wants to be her friend.
What do you think his primary purpose would be?
I would hope it's to, establish a relationship such that they both enjoy each other's company, perhaps establishing a good friendship.
It's because he wants to have sex with her. Okay.
That's what you want. You're the gross one here.
Why do you listen? Why is it that you want to fight with me on uncontroversial things? that young, attractive women are approached by complete strangers who are male, who try to get their phone numbers and things like this for the purpose of what? Being their friendy friend for the rest of their life, or because they want to reproduce with that woman, and that's their strong biological need.
I don't think they just want. I don't think they want to necessarily reproduce. Even in like the gross men that like just want sex, I don't think they're doing that about reproduction. I think they just want the way that sex makes them feel. Yeah, like that's more so about intimacy than reproduction. What they're craving is intimacy, not reproduction.
Why is the drive there to have sex so overwhelming for those young men to begin with?
Well, I think it often has to do with a lack of intimacy.
No, it often has to do with the fact that they want to reproduce. Their biological, it literally screams at them to reproduce.
Well, then why do they use things like birth control and condoms? They don't want to reproduce. They just want to have sex.
No, but the drive to have sex is the biological screening for reproduction. Like, nature didn't know we were going to make condoms up. Okay, they had no idea that we were going to make up birth control. Nature selected for men to have an overwhelming sex drive for the purpose of reproduction. This is not controversial.
We are so much more than just like an evolutionary drive to reproduce.
You keep saying that. Okay, yeah, we're.
Wait, what about like gay people too? Like gay people have the exact same desires for sex, but it has nothing to do with reproduction.
Yeah, that's masturbation, and it's still a high sex drive.
Do you think that gay people are just masturbating when they have sex with each other?
Well, it's not true biological sex.
It's not sex? Wait, you think that gay sex isn't sex?
Can any gay sex ever lead to reproduction?
I don't think that leading to reproduction is what makes something sex or not. Like oral sex is sex. Wait, you think that oral sex isn't sex? You are so disgusting. Like, you literally just see people as baby machines.
So you keep saying this like somehow it defeats or deflates my argument, and it doesn't. Even if I saw everybody as just baby-making machines, it's still not a defeater for my argument.
I think your argument simply doesn't pass the vibe check. Like you're just gross. It already
did. I mean, it already did. We already reduced it down to essential biological norms. We already broke it down to essential reproductive normalcy. And it's that simple. It's no more complex than that.
You're the one who's reducing it down to just that. I'm saying that these things are so much more than just that. What was your source stating that, like, biologists believe that sex is binary? What's your source on that?
So, I mean, how many sources do you want?
Give me your biggest and best source that the field of biology believes that biological sex is binary.
Okay, let me ask you a question. How many sexes are there?
Biological sex exists along a spectrum, and the precise number of sexes that exist is ultimately... There's a degree of arbitrarity in determining that.
How many sexes are there?
There is a spectrum between male and female.
How many sexes are there?
How many colors exist on this lamp behind me?
I have no idea. I can't see it.
Go ahead and look at my stream. How many colors are on this lamp behind me?
I have no idea. What does it have to do with anything?
It is very analogous. If you want to look at my stream, just please tell me how many colors exist on this lamp behind me.
I have no idea. Who cares? Tell me how it's analogous.
So there is a spectrum of colors ranging between pink and blue on this lamp behind me. Just like there's a spectrum of sexes in between male and female. Now the precise categorization we draw from the spectrum is ultimately a matter of perspective, or there's a degree of arbitrarity in it. Some might say there's just two, there's pink and blue. Some might say, well, I see pink, blue, and I also see purple. Some might say, well, there's this kind of like bluish purple, there's blue, there's purple, there's kind of pinkish purple, there's pink. But you could do the same thing with biological sex. You could say, okay, I see male and female. You could say, well, I see male-female intersex. You know, you could even delineate like there's male, there's kind of an intersex male, there's some more middling intersex cases, there's intersex female cases, there's female cases.
Yeah. So let's examine that. Okay. So now I understand your argument.
Okay.
On a color wheel, there are 12 colors. Do you agree or disagree?
What precise color wheel are you talking about? There are color wheels of like totally different numbers of colors.
There's 12 primary colors.
Well, I thought there was only 3 primary colors.
There's 12 total colors. Maybe you're right on the primary. Sorry, 3 primary colors, and then you have your secondary colors, the variations. but there's 12 total. The reason that there's 12 is because you can delineate using a color spectrometer, so that you can determine where one color ends and the other color begins, and you can do it with 100% precision, like they do with robots and food plants right now to check the color of your food. Where
do you draw the lines, though? Here's the thing. I will absolutely agree. So color is like wavelengths of light, right?
Let me finish.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you. Okay, so you can use a color spectrometer, like they do in the food industry, to make sure that the color is so precise that because that's how they tell for bacteria, just so you know. They'll be able to tell bacteria just by the color of the meat.
Okay, so how do they determine precisely what is the color? It's based off of the wavelength of light, right?
Yeah.
So how do we determine the boundary at which point a certain wavelength stops being blue and starts becoming purple, for example?
They use a mathematical spectrometer.
But how do we figure out where that line is? Where is the line between blue and purple? How do we determine that line?
The variation is done mathematically.
What's the process?
Listen. Even if there's only, let's say, you just count 3 primary colors, then you have to make a delineation that there are 3 different colors.
But we could do this in many different ways. We could draw the line. So here's the thing: you could try to take the color spectrum, which objectively exists along a spectrum, from the low hertz to the high hertz, and we could delineate it in 12 different blocks, and then say that, okay, those are where the boundaries are. What if we chose? What if we chose 15 blocks or 20 blocks or 30 blocks? We could choose we could choose so many different delineations that exist, because the objective truth is that color, wavelengths of light, exist along a spectrum. However, we come up with discrete classification systems alongside it, where we break it up into discrete little categories. And there's a degree of arbitrarity in determining those boundaries.
Listen, you're lying. There is an actual mathematical delineation between the color red and the color purple. There's a mathematical delineation between them using a spectrometer.
Yes. However, we could do more or less delineations. That's arbitrary.
Well, only if you're going to dispute the math, which nobody would do unless they were insane. So back to our sex characteristics, same thing. The sex category.
It's not insane. Reddish purple and purple are slightly different colors, and we could delineate it differently. It just depends how many lines we draw.
So you asked me, you said, how many colors are there? 12. How many sexes are there?
I think that it ultimately is a matter of perspective. There's a degree of arbitrarity in where we draw the lines.
Yeah, how many sexes are there?
I don't think you can objectively answer, because objectively, biological sex characteristics exist along a spectrum.
How many biological sexes are categorized right now?
It depends on who's categorizing
it. Biologists. How many sexes do they say there are?
Roughly 2.
Oh, 2.
Roughly. 2 sexes. It's important to include the roughly.
Well, then what's the third one?
Well, the roughly would be the variation in between various intersex conditions.
Yeah, so what is that? So what is that third sex called? The roughly in between. It's not
intersex.
Called anything, because there's only 2.
It's called intersex.
Intersex is not a categorization of sex.
That's a matter of perspective.
It's not a matter of perspective. Intersex people are either male or female.
There are some intersex people who are sexually pretty ambiguous.
And their secondary sex characteristics are meaningless to their male or female.
Well, of course, secondary sex characteristics are meaningless to you, because you see people as baby machines.
Well, no, I say that they're meaningless biologically. It doesn't matter.
They're not meaningless biologically. For example, sports, or for example, medicine, medical needs.
In determining their sex.
Biological sex affects your medical needs, doesn't it? And in more ways than just reproductive sex.
What does that have to do with anything that I'm saying? Has nothing to do with what I'm saying. You're going on a tangent down some fucking rabbit hole. Your secondary sex characteristics have nothing to do with whether or not you're biologically female or biologically male. Nothing.
They absolutely do, because biological sex is more than just gametes. That's what biologists believe.
No, they don't.
What is your source? What is your source that biologists believe that biological sex is binary and defined only by gametes?
You are my source, because you can only categorize 2 sexes. Period.
Untrue. I can categorize. It depends on the categorization system. I told you that I could define intersex as its own category. I could define intersex females and intersex males as their own categories. You can.
You can't. They're not. They're not. They can only produce one type of gamete. Period. So you can't.
We have already talked about people who can produce both, my dude.
Listen, this is checkmate.
Stop saying only. That's just not true.
When you ask me, no, it is only. And when you ask me, you say, well, who's your source for you're my source, because you can only categorize two.
Untrue. I can categorize more than two.
No, you can't.
I could say that intersex is its own category.
It's not.
You're just saying it's not. I'm saying I can. Boom. Done.
Okay, well then how is it its own category?
Well, you would define it by characteristics other than gametes. That's how you would do it.
Okay. So you would just make up new bullshit in order to categorize something however you saw fit.
I'm not making up new bullshit. Biologists believe that biological sex is more than just gametes.
Okay. Do you tell me, real quick, what does a biologist classify a person who produces small gametes as, male or female?
Typically male, but it would depend on their other sex characteristics.
No, always male.
No, it depends on their other sex characteristics.
Nope, there's no female on planet Earth who can produce small gametes. Isn't that true?
What about the people who produce both gametes?
There's no person on Earth who produces both in a viable way. Can't be done.
Stop switching to viable. You're changing the goalpost.
Well, if the gamete's not viable, then it's unimportant. If the body's not viable for the gamete production, it's an unimportant categorization.
So then biological sex is unimportant in cases that people don't have gametes?
No. I don't know why you keep switching. Now, you're the one who's moving the goalposts. So one more time, can any female on planet Earth produce small gametes?
I think that it would depend on your precise definition of female.
Produces large gametes.
Well, by that definition, no.
Or has the body.
Well, except for the cases in which people can produce both, because then, yeah.
They can't. They can't produce viable gametes. They can't produce both in viable quantity. It can't be done. Nobody's ever been able to impregnate themselves.
You're just trying to play definition games. That's all you're doing.
No, you're doing the definition games.
Wait. What is your source? No, I didn't. What is your source which suggests that biologists believe that biological sex is binary and I don't believe that. You can't use me as a source then.
You do.
I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming that. You're misquoting me then.
There's only two.
Wait, you are literally misquoting me then.
Name the third. What's it called?
I'm not saying there's a third. Intersex. Okay, I can say intersex.
So there's only two.
I can say intersex is its own category.
And what does intersex mean?
Intersex would be somebody who has mixed sex characteristics.
Okay, but what about gamete production?
It doesn't matter. As long as they have mixed sex characteristics in terms of other sex categories, they would be intersex.
Okay, but they wouldn't be, that's not a male or a female categorization, right?
What do you mean?
So would you categorize any of these intersex people as being male or female?
It depends on, it's a matter of perspective. Ultimately, we could draw distinctions such that there are intersex males and intersex females and ambiguous intersex cases, or we could just say that intersex is its own category. Once again, the precise discrete classifications that we draw from a sex spectrum is ultimately there's a degree of arbitrary in that.
Yeah, so then you've wrecked yourself definitionally by what you yourself believe.
How so?
So you say because you claim that the ambiguity, because you define male or female based on secondary sex characteristics, but you can't define intersex people by either of those things.
Yes, I can.
So within...
you can define intersex people as having mixed sex characteristics in any sexual across all sexual categories.
What does that mean?
Hormones, reproduction, anatomy, chromosomes, and brain matter distributions. Those are the sex characteristics I'm referring to. And somebody who has mixed sex characteristics would be intersex.
And so are any of those intersex people going to be classified male or female? Any of them?
It depends on how you classify male or female.
I'm asking you.
Under this classification system, they would be intersex.
So they would not be able to be classified as male or female?
Under this classification system, no, but under your classification system, yes.
Well, under your
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the classification system is arbitrary to an extent.
If under your classification system, they could be classified as something other than intersex, that means we would have to rule intersex out, right?
No,
because you don't have an exact.
I'm saying that in this sex classification system, intersex would be anybody who has mixed sex characteristics,
which could mean anything.
Not just anything. I laid out 5 categories of sex characteristics which would matter for this.
But you said some of them could be labeled male or female, right?
Under your classification system, not the one which I'm discussing right now.
So under your
you keep on changing whose classification system we're talking about whenever it's convenient for you. That's the problem.
Actually, the opposite's true. I'm just going in your worldview.
No, you're not. Under this proposed sex classification system, they would not be defined by gametes. They would be defined by the composite of their sex characteristics.
Okay, and that's all that they would be defined by.
The composite of their sex characteristics, correct.
And that's what would combine male or female, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And intersex.
Got you. So let me ask you this question. Let's say that there was a global plague that only affected women. That's all that it affected. Okay. How would you tell intersex people that they should take the vaccine to inoculate themselves from this plague that only affected women? How would you delineate that so that they would know that they needed to take that vaccine?
How does this disease only affect women?
Who cares?
Well, I think it matters because if this is something that affects hormonal females, you would inoculate the hormonally female population. If this is something that affects reproductive females, you would inoculate the reproductive female population. If this is something that affects anatomical females, you would inoculate the anatomical female population. You need to try to figure out what is the precise.
Now we have females in your system. Thank you.
I'm talking about under specific categories. You can label male or female.
Just like that, we have females in your system. Thanks for doing
that. So let me explain. Somebody who is, say, hormonally female but reproductively male would be intersex in this system. That their classification would be intersex in this system. So you can use terms like hormonally female while still classifying someone as intersex. Does that make sense to you?
No, because it's absurd. How would you be able to tell them whether to take the vaccine or not?
Well, we would need to figure out what specifically the disease targets. If it targets people that have certain hormone levels, we would go based on people's hormone levels. If it targets people that have certain reproductive organs, we would go based on those reproductive organs. We need to figure out what specific quality of woman or femaleness it targets, and then inoculate along those lines.
Let's just say reproduction.
Okay, then we would inoculate the reproductive females.
The females.
The reproductive females.
Right. Well, just females. They would just be females, right?
We're talking about my system, right? So they're the reproductive females.
System. So you would just say, well, men can reproduce in your system because you don't consider them men.
What are you talking about?
So, well, because under your system, everybody's intersex. There's no specific.
I did not say that everybody's intersex. I said that people with mixed sex characteristics are intersex.
Okay, people with mixed sex characteristics. So how would you be able to delineate which one of them are reproducing females or not?
So if you want to determine someone's reproductive sex, I guess that would be so it would depend, I guess, specifically on what reproductive quality you're looking at. You could look at things such as like reproductive organs. You could look at things like genitalia. You could look at things like gametes. It kind of depends what specifically it targets. Like, for example, if the disease affects people
it targets the reproductive. Let's just say that it targets their ovaries and it targets their uterus.
Well, then we would only inoculate people that have ovaries and uteruses.
Sure. We would just and those people inside of your intersex category would then be segregated out for these inoculations, right?
Yeah, because it's along the lines of those certain qualities.
But you would still consider those people to be intersex.
Under this classification system, yeah.
Yeah, and do you think that classification system's useful?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because it properly shows that people can have mixed sex characteristics in ways that matter medically. For example, if someone is hormonally male, yet they have, you know, a uterus and ovaries, and they belong to this intersex category, yeah, it's still important to inoculate them with the other people that have those categories. Right. If there's somebody who is biologically female but doesn't have a womb and ovaries, they don't need the inoculation.
Biologically female. What do you mean biologically female?
All the other sex characteristics are female.
Well, what does that mean?
In terms of hormones, in terms of anatomy, in terms of...
Well, what does that mean? How do
chromosomes,
you know?
In terms of...
know that...
You can test these things.
Well, wait, they're on a spectrum.
They are, and you can test these things.
Yeah. Well, how do you know where to draw the delineation point on the spectrum?
There's no clean way to draw the delineation point on the spectrum. That's been my entire point.
Well, then you would have a big problem inoculating them if you didn't know how to draw the clean fucking break on the spectrum.
So here's the thing. Wait, no. This is the difference. This inoculation isn't along biological sex. It's along a specific biological sex characteristic. That's why we can figure out who gets inoculated.
Yeah, females. It's along the female biological sex characteristic because there's only two sexes.
It's not strictly female though, because there are people which we consider female that don't have a womb and ovaries, and there are people which I would consider to be male, trans males, that would have those parts. And so here's the thing: it's along the lines of those certain anatomical features. It's not along the lines of biological sex.
No, you have females who have those parts, and then you have females who also don't have those parts. You don't have males who have those parts. That's absurd.
So therefore, it's not along the lines of biological sex. It's along the lines of those parts.
No, it's not even along the lines of those parts. Those parts are part of the biological sex.
Not strictly.
Yeah, strictly. There is no woman on planet Earth. There's no man on planet Earth who can have a baby.
What about a trans man?
Not possible.
Trans men can have babies.
Men. They're not men. Those are females, biological females. That's why they can have babies.
It's in the name, trans man. A trans man is a man.
Oh, that's not. I mean, you know, you could call somebody a leprechaun. It's in the name, so I guess they must be a leprechaun. That's absurd. If somebody puts on elf ears, are they an elf?
No. But being a trans man is not a costume.
Yes, it is. In fact, I would say it's fashion. That's what gender is fashion. Literally.
Not at all.
Because
that's not even 100%. How sociologists define gender.
I don't care. Again, how sociology defines gender is an absurdity in and of itself.
But I thought you distinguished sex from gender.
They claim that males... Well, I don't believe in gender at all. I think gender is a construction that's completely and totally made up, and it's a LARP. You guys are LARPing. Literally.
We're talking about social roles and expectations assigned to people. Like that literally exists in society.
You have no idea what those social roles are supposed to be. Nobody does.
We can descriptively point them out.
No, you can descriptively make assumptions. That's it. You can't descriptively point out actual social roles for males and females. It can't be done.
We certainly can.
There's no...
Yeah.
Go ahead, then name one. Name a social role that's female.
A social role for females? Taking care of the home.
That's only female?
I didn't say only.
Okay, well then your category doesn't matter. Right?
I don't think that you have to have something that has strict adherence for it to be, you know, like for it to be real or for it to matter.
Well, then there's no way for you to socially categorize it correctly. This is my whole point. It's a LARP.
No, you certainly can. You can look at how those social roles are generally applied to people and the types of people they're generally applied to. You can do so descriptively.
Oh, so now if we're going off of averages, that's not okay to do with sex, but it's okay to do with social roles?
Well, I think that you can certainly say things that are true on average about sex, just like how you can say things that are certainly true on average about gender, but you can't say so absolutely. That's exactly my point. You can say that those things are true on average or generally, but you can't say that they're true absolutely.
Let's just make the pre-assumption here that what I say about sex is 99.9% accurate for 99.9% of people, which it is.
98% accurate, but go for it.
Okay, but let's just say, okay, for a second, and no, it's 99.9. The study that you're looking at is I think it's the silver something study, which puts intersex people at 2 point something percent. That's been corrected.
1.7%.
Yeah, it's way too high. It's been corrected.
Why is it way too high? Wait, these are people that are born with mixed sex characteristics. That's the definition of intersex. That's literally the definition of intersex.
They're not. They're not. They also classify people who have things like testicular cancer. They classify people who have. Yes, they do. And that's why there was a correction to it. It's the Sterling study. That's what it is. The Sterling study. And there has been a correction already for the Sterling study. And the correction shows that intersex is 0.2% when they correct for these nonsense that they put in the Sterling
I know
study.
that study you're talking about. They specifically excluded many people that truly have mixed sex characteristics.
Bullshit. No, they didn't. What they did was they excluded people who shouldn't have been included in the first place. That's one. And then the second thing is, even if we just granted it to you that it's 98%, which it's not, it's 99.9%. That's what the 98% study shows.
No,
it's not.
Continually study.
You're going off the Sterling.
Stop. Continuously, studies show that depending on your precise criteria, it ranges from 0.2 to 1.7%. I apply the broadest criteria of having mixed sex characteristics because that's the definition of intersex. The definition of intersex is being born with mixed sex characteristics, which is 1.7%. The lowest estimates are 0.2%. At least the lowest fair estimates.
Yeah, 0.2%. You go with the broadest one because it affirms your bias, even though the latest study corrected the Sterling study.
It's because it definitionally fits the definition of intersex better. It's categorically more accurate.
It's categorically more accurate for what you want, for your biases. But let's just say, okay, fine. We'll just
what is intersex? What is intersex then?
98% would still be a much more precise way to categorize people than inside your social zone. You cannot give me social functions for a female with 98% accuracy. You can't do it.
I don't think you need to meet a certain threshold of accuracy in order to classify something.
Right, but my average is at 98% isn't good enough, but your average at no % is good enough.
Well, I'm saying hold up. The guiding principle is that we should pick the most accurate model we can. The binary model of biological sex gets things wrong about 2% of the time. However, the spectrum model is right 100% of the time. We as scientists should value the scientific accuracy. Wait, how does the spectrum model get anything wrong?
You just said that even on the scale of intersex people, the delineation, depending on who's looking at it, can be between 0.2 and 1.7.
I'm talking about the spectrum model of biological sex, as in classifying people as the sum of their sex characteristics along the spectrum. That's 100% accurate.
No, because if we can't even agree
what's inaccurate about the biological sex spectrum?
I'm trying to tell you, if we can't even agree on what the percentage of intersex people are, how could you possibly agree that these sex characteristics are correct?
Here's the thing. With each intersex condition, we can look at the precise combination of sex characteristics they have, and we can place them on the spectrum accordingly. That's how you do it. It's that simple.
No, you can't put them on the spectrum accordingly, or you would be able to know their social functions accordingly. Why can't you do that?
We're talking about biology, not sociology.
Even if we're talking about biology, you still can't do this with the accuracy that you're pretending you can do it with.
Yes, you can. You can test people's chromosomes. You can test their hormone levels. You can observe their external and physical anatomy. You can test the structure of their brain. You can test, their reproductive capacity. All of these things can be determined, and you can classify people as the sum of those characteristics with 100% accuracy.
100% accuracy, but you can't with 100% accuracy tell me if it's 0.2 people or 1.7% of people who are actually even considered intersex.
Well, that depends on your definition of intersex. That depends on your definition of intersex.
It's so ridiculous that you're even saying this because it's not settled and you can't tell 100% of the time. But that aside, you can still tell, even at 98% for a classification, biological classification, 98% is
what's the definition of intersex?
Compared to your let me finish before you ask me. No, I'm not going
I think that's important. No, you're trying to say that my system's bad because we can't classify intersex people. So we need to figure out what what is intersex.
Okay, whatever.
We need to know this before we can continue.
Okay, whatever the criteria was in the Sterling correction, I consider that to be the intersex criteria.
Why do you go with that?
You'd have to pull the study up because it's the latest science. Now that aside, back to what I was saying. I already told you what my criteria was, so we're not going down that rabbit hole. Let's
see. Let's see what this one is.
I don't want to go down your rabbit hole until you answer my fucking question.
Your study says stop. Your study says that people with Klinefelter syndrome are not intersex.
I'm not doing it.
People with Klinefelter syndrome have XXY chromosomes, and they display a wide variety of mixed sex characteristics. Your study you're pointing to does not classify them as intersex. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so I'm happy to dive into that, but we're going to answer these questions first.
I think it's important to discuss what is intersex before we continue.
I know you want to divert from this, but I need to know real quick, how do you determine with any degree of accuracy what the social role of a female is supposed to be?
You would observe what you would observe it in society, essentially.
You would observe it in society. And what degree of certainty do you think that that'll give you?
I don't know.
You don't know. So you don't have any degree of certainty that that would give you for what their social role is actually supposed to be.
Correct. Social roles are right, culturally relative, and there's a degree of subjectivity in it.
If it's not a LARP, if you're not LARPing, then tell me this. Since you don't actually know with any degree of certainty what the social role of a female is supposed to even be, how do you know you're actually transitioning into one?
Are you talking about female? Well, that would be biological characteristics. And I know that medically speaking, through medical transition, I am changing these biological characteristics.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll say woman. How do you know you're actually transitioning into a woman if you don't even know what their social roles are supposed to be?
Because people perceive and treat me as a woman.
Who?
Whenever I go out in public, people call me ma'am and she and etc.
So, one more time, how do you know that you're transitioning into a woman if you don't know what the social role of a woman's supposed to be with any degree of accuracy?
We can certainly have some degrees of accuracy. For example, being called ma'am. That's a pretty solid womanly characteristic.
That somebody calls you ma'am?
Yeah.
What if they call you sir and you want to be called ma'am?
What about it?
Well, then the degree of accuracy is out the window, right?
Nothing has a perfect degree of accuracy.
Yeah, but are you still a woman in your mindset? The answer is yes, right? So
I think that you could certainly make an argument that when you are misgendered, your gender is denied from you if you perceive gender as a lived social experience.
So then you got to tell me, how do you know it's a lived social experience? You don't know what the social role of a woman's supposed to be.
What about being called ma'am? That's one example of a social role for women.
That's not how is it a social role to be called ma'am?
Because that's a way you're treated. That's a way you're treated differently socially based on being a man or a woman. So social roles exist. Just because we can't perfectly encapsulate who precisely is assigned a social role or fulfills a social role doesn't mean that they don't exist or that they can't be observationally measured to an extent.
Yeah, but you can't measure them to any degree of any type of certainty. You can't even give me a rough estimate.
You could follow someone and see how many times they're called sir versus ma'am in different social settings.
That's all subjective, though. And everybody's physiology is completely different, so you don't even know how they're being perceived. There's no way for you to have anything other than an arbitrary standard for what you consider how a woman is supposed to be treated or what their social roles are supposed to be. That's why we consider this to be a LARP.
It's supposed to would be arbitrary, but observationally would not necessarily be completely arbitrary.
Yeah, but you can't observe it in a vacuum. So the second you move from
society doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Well, I didn't say it did. That's the whole problem. So the whole problem with this is that you can't make those
just because you can't observe it in a vacuum doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
I didn't say that. But what I am saying is that because you have no sociological standard for this, you don't really know what the experience of a woman is. There's no possible way that you can know that you're transitioning into one. How would you know?
You would go based off of how you were perceived and treated by others.
You're just going based on how you feel.
No, not at all. I'm going by how others perceive and treat me.
And how would you know how they're seeing and treating you, except off of how you feel?
Based off of the gender terminology they use for me.
So that's the only. What if you were deaf?
So you could do this in writing as well. Also, I'm not deaf. We're talking about me in particular.
Yeah. So you're deaf and you can't read. You know what I mean? There's all types of different categorizations for this. There's no way that just
others could observe the gendered terms which they are labeled by others.
Look, I have been, now I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just being factual, but I've been in your chat while you're having these debates, and not everybody is calling you ma'am. Okay, let's be real about this. That's not factually happening. All right. So I don't know where you're coming up with this.
I'm not talking about on online discourse. I'm talking about in public in society. People simply perceive and treat me as a woman.
Yeah, I have no way to determine if that's true or not. We just have to go. But everything that I observe shows that it's not being.
We could do an observational study of my day-to-day life, and I can certainly tell you that that is what happens. People simply perceive and treat me as a woman. That is just a fact about my lived social experience.
Yeah, and do they do this within your certain academic circles, and so they feel obligated to do so? Whereas if you're out in the general public and just ask people how they perceive you, do you think that might be different?
Both perceive me as women.
How do you know?
Because of the gender terms they used to refer to me.
Yeah, but I mean, how many people in the general population have you gone to like rural America and seen how people observe? Yeah, and they call you ma'am and treat you like a woman.
Yep.
Really, they open doors for you and shit.
Yep.
Like, at one point, I wonder, are any of you guys going to give me like an actual real answer? You know what I mean?
I
never do. Like so I'm to
an actual real answer for what? Wait, what do you want a real answer for?
So I'm actually to believe that even though I can physically watch the comments as they're going by when you're doing one of these online Q&As.
Have you ever considered that transphobes who know I'm trans will treat me differently than people in general public who don't know I'm trans? Have you ever considered that?
The sample size is going to be the same. What are you talking about?
There's not here's the difference.
Transphobes in the Gen Pop.
Well,
it's who you surround yourself with,
the difference is that the transphobes in the general population don't know that I'm trans. Therefore, they just treat me as a woman.
Well, how do people online know it?
Because I'm open about it. Yeah.
You think that they can't tell?
They absolutely can't tell.
That's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. Where did
so many people online, people that don't check my profile, simply believe I'm a cis woman.
No, they did the voice modding alone. What do you mean? No, they don't.
No, they seriously do. I've had many people on my live that have thought that I was a cis woman.
I'm not gonna sit here and like try to fucking.
You don't know what my lived social experience is. I do.
I don't need to know. I don't need to know what your lived social experience is. I can.
Well, that's what we're talking about right now.
Myself. I can see the comments for myself, and I know for sure.
Transphobes who know that I'm trans treat me differently than transphobes that don't know that I'm trans. And when I'm out in public, people don't know that I'm trans. Every person in public that I've come out to as trans has told me that they were surprised and that they didn't know.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure. Well, in any case, regardless of that, what is true is that there's no way for you to socially determine what a woman's role is even supposed to be with any degree of scientific certitude whatsoever. Just saying that, well,
you can certainly do it with some degree of scientific rigor.
Well, what degree?
I don't think you can precisely lay out the degree, but you can certainly.
So you don't know.
You can generally observe some observational differences, and yeah, you can absolutely do that to some degree.
Yeah, to some degree, but you don't know what degree.
You don't need to know exactly the degree.
All right, because there is no degree in which you can determine it.
Not true. There is some degree.
What it is.
You conceded that there was some degree.
What is it?
You don't need to know the precise degree, but there is some degree.
Right, of course. You don't need to know, but it exists. Sure.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. So even if we granted that it did, there's no way for you to make the determination of what it is. So there's no way for you to know that you're even transitioning into being a woman, and that you're
people
even
perceive and treat me as a woman. That's how I know.
That's how you know what?
That's how I know that my experiential gender is that of a woman, because people perceive and treat me as such.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. If I dressed up like Legolas and I went out and people treated me like I was an elf, would that make me an elf?
Is elf a social category?
Sure.
I don't think it is. I think that elf is a species, not a social category.
Do you well, wait a second. Do you know what an elf is?
What's the definition of elf? What's your definition of elf?
Well, I'm just asking, like, in the commons, if somebody said, like, do you know what an elf from the Lord of the Rings is, you would say yes, right?
Well, yeah, we'd be thinking of a fantasy species.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
that's not a social category.
Stop. Let's just assume that there was 25 people who lived in a compound who all dressed like elves every single day, and they were referred to as the elves who live in that compound. Now we have a social category, right?
You could certainly say that they're socially elves.
Yeah, so now we have a social category. So now that we have the social category of elf, right? Are those people elves?
Socially, yeah.
Socially, yeah. So what if they acted like dogs?
How so?
They like barked at the moon and they ate dog food, and people in the commons refer to them as the dogs that live in that compound.
Are you saying like people
socially?
like they are dogs socially in every way?
They're just referred to that way.
Well, what makes them socially dogs?
The fact that people refer to them like that because they act like dogs.
But dog isn't a social category. That's the problem.
Well, sure it is. Dog is both a social category and a biological category.
Not at all.
I mean, we call dog. Yeah, of course, we call dog dog. That's the social category.
How is dog a social category?
Well, because the actual species is not called dog, is it?
It is, depending on what kind of colloquial context you're using.
No, that's a canine, not a dog. Dog is what's used in the commons. So one more time, it does even if it was.
But dog is a species, not a social category. That's the difference. Woman is a social category, not a species.
You could have both. You could have both, and it wouldn't matter. If they acted like that and became a social category, would you say that they were dogs?
I don't think that dog is a social category. That's the difference.
Yeah, okay, so elves are not a social category, but you just conceded if they acted like elves and people refer to them as elves, they would be elves.
If you were talking about like an elf society, then yeah.
Well, no, I said people living in a compound who dressed up like elves and people referred to them as elves, and you said, yeah, they would socially be elves.
Well, that would be an elf society.
So then they would be elves?
If we can construct an elf society, then yeah, you could socially be an elf.
Okay, so what if they socially became dogs and they
How do you construct a dog society?
I don't know. They all eat dog food and howl at the moon and shit. However they did it.
That's not like a social category though. That's the difference.
How would people who put on fake ears become actual elves? They wouldn't.
I didn't say they become like biological elves. I said that they socially become elves.
Right.
Because they created an elf society.
Right. So the same thing should apply with any categorization then. There's no categorization that shouldn't be able to apply to if it applies to them. So you can come up with any social categorization that you want and call it that, but that doesn't make it true. That's my whole point.
I mean, womanhood is a generally observed and true social phenomenon in at least in this society. Yeah,
but it's associated with reproduction.
Not strictly.
It's not associated. Yeah, strictly. People associate womanhood with reproduction. It's the most
not
common
strictly though. For example,
of the word.
Infertile women are women.
Yeah, but they're still associated with reproduction.
But it's not like a necessary or a strict association. That's the problem though.
It is. They can be totally and completely unable to ever reproduce as long as they're associated with reproduction. That's enough. That's the common usage everywhere on planet Earth.
I don't think the common usage is strictly reproduction, though.
Yeah, well, okay, so the most common categorization, again, for the definition of woman, is a member of the human species most commonly associated with reproduction.
I am pretty certain that when people generally think about, like, man-woman, they don't think about gamete production.
Oh my God, I didn't say gamete production. I said they think about reproduction. They associate it with having babies. They don't think in terms of gametes. They're not like, oh, you can have eggs or can't have eggs. They don't think that way. They think babies and baby making, which is why they have the biological drive, males, to have sex with women. Because
I don't think that reproduction is just the only or like the most common thing that people think about when they think about man versus woman.
Yes, it is.
I think they think about a lot more than just reproduction.
What? What do they think about besides reproduction?
All these different physical characteristics, all these different social characteristics. I think that they think of a lot of different characteristics, not just reproduction.
Okay. All the secondary sex characteristics that men find attractive are associated with reproduction. All of them. Oh, you got big breasts? That's because it's biologically, that means that you probably will have a good way to feed my offspring.
How does having bigger breasts mean that you're going to make more milkies?
Yeah, it does. It does mean that. generally.
Do big boobies make more milkies?
Yeah, of course they do. Yes. Why do you think boobs get larger when women have a baby? Because they get filled up with milk.
Let's see. Here's a breastfeeding guide. Here's a breastfeeding guide that says breast size is irrelevant when it comes to how much milk you produce.
No, that's nice. I don't care what it says. I'm telling you right now, the reason that men are attracted to big breasts. Why are men attracted to big breasts?
Because they look nice.
No, it's not because they look nice.
Society makes it sexual. Because society sexualizes breasts.
Structurally sound. It's because they're structurally sound. That's why men like them. No. Men like them because
society sexualizes breasts.
No, nonsense. It's not because of that.
Wait. Literally, in cultures where nudity is non-sexual, just seeing breasts is not seen as a sexual thing.
Okay. Which culture is that?
Like nudist societies. They don't see breasts as inherently sexual.
Yeah, okay. Bullshit. Not only that...
Wait, you don't think that nudist societies don't see nudity as inherently sexual?
Of course they do. And of course
they don't see nudity as inherently sexual.
I want to see your source. I want to see your source that nudist societies no longer see breasts as being sexual. I want to see your source on it. Because I don't believe
nudist societies.
Yeah. Because I can literally show you...
Sexualization of breasts. I mean, like, for example, in like this is literally like so culturally relative. For example, like in Africa, like knees are considered like sexy and like women cover knees in like certain regions. Like literally whatever society considers as you know, taboo and sexual, that's what people end up being sexually attracted to, overwhelmingly so.
Okay. So if I pull up a scientific paper that was written by biologists explaining the evolutionary reason that men are attracted to big breasts, and it has to do with reproduction, will you accept that as likely being true?
What is your source?
Well, let me give it to you. But I want to know if you'll accept it as being true if there's an evolutionary claim that's being made.
There's still like a cultural element to it because of for example non-sexual nudity.
There's always a cultural element to everything, but the biological imperative always is reproduction. That's how we have been able to exist.
That is not always the biological imperative. You keep on coming back to that, but that's just not.
Listen,
you literally said always.
What you do is you go, oh, there's 5 outliers. Therefore, it's not an always. It's not for everybody. It's like, look, if you
then you should stop using loaded terms like always.
Listen, if you're going off of like a 97, 98%, or even in this case, let's just say for reproduction, you're going off of 75%, like 75% of people want to have sex with each other because that's their biological imperative. That's enough for that statement to be like, okay, pretty much everybody operates under these biological paradigms from an evolutionary standpoint, and why wouldn't they? We have to breed or we die out as a species. That's why secondary sex characteristics are attractive to men. Wide hips, things like this. These are things that are attractive no matter where you are in the sphere. So I don't know what you're talking about with this, but just claiming, oh, well, there's a social dynamic to it too. I don't dispute that there's going to be a small amount of social dynamic to any sexualization, but there's still going to be norms that are true.
Ooh, I actually found. Wait, I found in a society that doesn't sexualize breasts. The Paraha of Brazil, they do not sexualize breasts. They're just not seen as sexual in their society.
Mm-hmm. So they have to like what? Beat down the. This is like the one culture you can point to.
You just wanted an example.
Yeah. Send me the source on that too. Send it over real quick.
You want
so I can read it.
Paraha and breasts?
Yeah. Send it to me so I can look. I don't believe you because thus far you've lied to me like 300 times in this conversation. So.
How have I lied to you?
Well, there's multiple ways that you've lied to me. So
how so? Explain.
The first way is you continuously conflate and say, "Oh, there's only 2 sexes," and you said that, and then you backed off on it. We're like, "No, there's not really though because
that's not what I said."
Intersex. Yes, it is what you said.
You're not listening to me. You just don't understand me. No, that's the problem. Yeah, you're accusing me of lying when you just don't understand me. That's really dishonest and bad faith, my dude.
Do you want me? I can literally give you your argument back. Can you give me mine back?
Yeah, you believe that biological sex is binary because gametes are binary.
Because, no, not because gametes are binary. Because reproduction is binary.
How is reproduction binary?
Because only women can have children. The gamete production, it is true that gametes are binary, but that only proves that there's two sexes.
That's literally what I said you said, and then you just said that that's not true.
No, but
wait. My summary of your argument was biological sex is binary because gametes are binary, and you literally just said that back to me. You literally just said that back to me. You are being so disingenuous in bad faith.
You don't even let me finish my sentence when I correct you. You literally won't even let me finish my sentence.
You've been misconstruing everything I've said. You've called me a liar, and now you're saying I'm misrepresenting you when you repeated back exactly to me what I said you said.
You cut me off. You literally cut me off, and then say when you cut me off, no, you're misrepresenting me. You didn't even let me finish. Right? Doesn't even make any sense. One more time.
You are calling me a liar, you are mischaracterizing me, and then you are accusing me of lying again when I mean,
you are lying. You are lying.
How am I lying?
You still won't let me finish. Let me finish.
Wait, how does that make me a liar? How does not letting you finish make me a liar? You just throw out liar. You just throw out liar willy-nilly. I don't think we can continue this conversation if you're going to call me a liar for not letting you finish, because that's not what a liar is. You don't know what words mean. That's just been the entire problem of the conversation.
You don't know what it means, so
I think we're done here. Thank you for coming on my live. Like, you just don't know what a liar is, and so that's gonna be it. Thanks for coming on. That's the convo. Yeah. No, I was not lying. You were misconstruing my argument, and then when I repeated your argument back to you as you requested, you literally repeated exactly what I said back to me. You were making the exact argument which I said you were making, and then you called me a liar, and then you called me a liar for cutting you off? That's not what a liar is. A liar is somebody who says something factually untrue. Cutting you off doesn't make me a liar. It means that I'm done with your bullshit. And that's that.